Hello again and welcome to the Vision Channel. I'm Ron Jones. My special guest today is Canon Malcolm Widdecombe. His story is quite a fantastic one. As a matter of fact, he was appointed to a church over 40 years ago, which was at that point on the verge of closing. But it's still opened, and not only opened, but it's a thriving church in the very heart of Bristol. Now, I find this story absolutely intriguing. I hope you will too. And at the end of the programme, you'll be able to judge for yourself. Malcolm, welcome to the Vision Channel. And I'm delighted that you've been able to come and share this programme with me. What's it like being a canon?
It's wonderful.
Is it?
No extra money's involved. That's sad, and no extra responsibilities. It's just a sort of an honour that you get given for good behaviour, possibly.
Now, it has been suggested. I don't know whether to put this to you or not, but I'm risking it. It has been suggested that you're a bit of a loose cannon. I
think I've always been a rebel.
Yeah, that's it, is it?
That's right.
So what I've heard is right.
I should think so. Yes.
Have you got into trouble for it?
Not so far, but maybe that's because I haven't been found out.
Well, let's go back to your childhood then. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. Were you brought up in a Christian home, Christian parents?
Well, first of all, I was born in Gibraltar, which is of significance these days. My dad was in the Ministry of Defence, and or the Admiralty, as it used to be called in those days. Their headquarters were at Bath, so in actual fact, when we came home in 1939, most of my childhood was spent at Bath.
Yes.
And you asked if my home was a Christian home. My mum was a committed Christian. I would say my dad was sympathetic. I wouldn't say he was committed, but he was definitely sympathetic, and perhaps became more sympathetic as he got older.
Yes.
But my mum was definitely a committed Christian. I was sent to a Christian school.
Was that Monkton?
That was Monkton Combe, yes.
Why did they choose to send you to a Christian school?
Well, they were a little bit anxious about the Christian side of it because they'd heard that the school was rather religious and they didn't want me to get too religious. And I'm very grateful to God to say that I'm not the slightest bit religious. I'm a Christian, and there's a big difference.
I'll come into that later.
All right. And they sent me to this school mainly because I went as a day boy, first of all, to the prep school. But they wanted me to board at the senior school because they knew that they were coming up for a posting away from Bath.
Yes.
And it would almost be necessary for me to board.
Yes.
And so, in fact, when I went to the senior school, I was there for a year, going home at weekends.
Yep.
And then, after I'd been there a year, my dad was appointed to Priddy's Hard, which is part of the Portsmouth setup of armament depots, and he was the boss down there.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful house, depot house, yes, a massive garden, 2 gardeners paid by Her Majesty the Queen. It was absolutely wonderful. That was for 2 years.
God,
So I was a boarder.
You've really lived it up, haven't you?
Oh, I try. And then they went to Singapore for 3 years. So I didn't see him for 3 years.
But you were boarding in.
But I was boarding.
How did you find boarding in then? Okay.
I loved it, yes,
it
was okay, yes.
Going to a Christian school like that,
Yep.
can you say to me today whether it had any impact upon you?
Oh, it had a tremendous impact. I mean, I could almost, looking back, comparing today with then, I would say that we were almost living in revival. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
2/3 of the school belonged to the Christian Union.
Yeah.
Everybody enjoyed morning assembly, which was in the school chapel. They enjoyed it,
and it would be
except possibly for Friday, was when it was music practice, and that's bored me all my life. But you're a Welshman; I shouldn't say that to you.
You shouldn't.
No, I know. Yeah. But we actually enjoyed going to chapel. Sunday sermons. If you go there today, they tell you to keep it short, you know. But it was nothing for us to have an hours-long sermon from some wild missionary from somewhere or another, probably an old boy of the school.
Yeah.
And it was thrilling stuff. I used to love it. Our school chaplain, he went up to Haringey for the Billy Graham Crusades, was so blessed by it all that he then went on the Southampton Crusade with Major Bill Batt, who was one of those who invited Billy Graham over in the first place, for the Southampton Crusade, and went as Bill Batt's song leader.
Did he?
He put the senior Bible class, which was a entirely voluntary thing, he put us through the Billy Graham counselling course. So I was trained as a counsellor at the age of 16, before I was converted even.
Now, what ambitions did you have then in those days?
When I went to schools, I was going up through the senior school I had serious thoughts about being a school teacher. I think mainly because I looked at our teachers, and so many of them were committed Christians, and such rich characters as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, to be a Christian school teacher, you could really influence a lot of kids for good.
Yeah.
And that was a thought that I had.
You felt you wanted part of your life to be one that influenced kids.
But then it changed. Then it changed
Yeah.
as I became more senior in the school. I was becoming more involved in Christian activities, and I had an uncle, my dad's brother, and he was a parson. And he had a marvellous parish. He was the vicar of Yetminster with rhyme intrinsica. Now you beat that. And,
I can't even say it.
I know. There you go. You see, and it's not Welsh either.
No.
But I saw Uncle Don take services and so on, and I thought I could do that. And I was in fact doing it at school, because we used to take it in turns to take services in the countryside at the chapels and so on. And I thought I could do that. And so I talked to the chaplain, and my name was actually down to see a bishop, to be nominated to the selection board, and so on. And all this before I was a Christian.
Right. Now, can you tell me this? I want to change the subject completely.
Sure.
What's it like having a leading politician for a sister?
It's absolutely wonderful. About 10 years ago, people would be introduced to my sister, and they would say, "Oh, are you related to Malcolm Widdecombe by any chance?" Now it's the other way round. If I meet people, they say, "Oh, are you related to Anne Widdecombe by any chance?" The situation's changed. But I don't mind a bit, because I ride along on her coattails. It's absolutely wonderful.
What about your family now? Your wife and
yes,
children?
I got a wife. I got 3 kids. They're all grown up, all married. There's Sean, there's Roger, and there's Fiona.
So you're doing okay then. Now, in December 1955, you went to Capon Hall in the Lake District.
Correct, that's right.
And whilst you were there, something happened that was absolutely vital in your life.
It was.
What was it?
Well, I kept saying to you, I was doing all these Christian things before I became a Christian. And I think what had happened, you see, as I look back, there was never a time when I haven't believed in God. And I go I mean, that doesn't do any good. The devil believes in God, doesn't do him any good. But I mean, I would also say there's never been a time when I haven't loved God. But there's more to it than that. To be a Christian, you've actually got to call on the name of the Lord to be saved, it says. You know, if you're going to get into the kingdom, you've got to get in there by force. You know, you don't pussyfoot about. There's nothing automatic. There's got to be a response from the human heart to the Saviour.
Yes.
And anyway, I went to Capon Hall, and the first meeting, it was young people's house party. Must have been about 4 or 5 different nations represented. And it was a wonderful time. Major Ian Thomas was the founder and director of Capon Hall. He spoke the first night. He gave an evangelistic address. He ended up with an evangelistic appeal. And he said, now I want you, he said, to say this prayer. And those of you who are Christians, I want you to pray for those who are not. So I thought I was a Christian, so I prayed for those who weren't. I didn't realize it, I was praying for myself. Now the second night, whether it was a slip of the tongue or not, he said, I want you all to say this prayer, and said the sinner's prayer. And I can't remember it exactly, but it went something like, oh God, I thank you that you so loved the world, that you sent your only Son to die for sinners. That means he died for me. I receive him as my Lord and my Savior. We went on like this. He said it phrase by phrase. We repeated it in the quiet of our hearts. And then he said, and from this moment forth, and I was saying from this moment forth, I serve you in the fellowship of your church. I will serve you in the fellowship of your church. Thank you. Thank you. Now I know I'm a Christian. Now I know I'm a Christian. And that was it. That floored me. I'd been well taught. I'd been well trained. And I knew from what the Bible taught that I ought to know whether I was a Christian or not, but I jolly well didn't. I thought I was a Christian.
In spite of the fact that you were doing some preaching.
I suddenly realized, it just was brought home to me that I did not know I was a Christian.
Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. That sinner's prayer that you prayed, we're going to put it up on the screen. So that we got it exactly right.
Okay.
And anybody who feels sort of moved by what you've said so far, they can say that in their own home, can't they?
Anyone can say that prayer, anywhere, any place. If it's from their heart, once they've said it, they will become a Christian. And the Holy Spirit will witness with their spirit that they really are a child of God.
That's
and
great.
they'll know.
Okay, now, You then went to Major Thomas and told him. What did he say to you?
Well, yes, you see, I've been well taught. You believe Christ, you receive Christ, then you confess Christ publicly. So I thought, well, I'm going to confess it, I may as well go to the boss. So I went and saw Ian Thomas, and I said, Major Thomas, last night I said the prayer and I became a Christian. And he said to me, that's great. From now on, you're going to save souls. You're not going to ask God to save souls through you. You're going to expect God to save souls through you. And because you expect God to save souls through you, you're going to thank him in advance for the souls he will save through you. Because Jesus Christ is living in your heart now, and soul winning is his business. Goodbye.
So that
was the best piece of theology I've ever heard in my life.
Now, I want to move on to February 1956.
Right.
That was just a couple of months after Cape and Ray, after your commitment.
Yep.
And you were in the sick bay.
That's right.
Once again.
I used to try and get there once a term at least, because we had such an attractive assistant matron, you see. But,
right. Now,
but I really had the flu this time, yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
You're the first person I've ever known in my life to tell me that you enjoyed having the flu. But it was to do with the assistant matron or whatever.
Well, that's right. I could also say I quite enjoy operations, in actual fact. So I'm fascinated by the whole thing. Yeah, I had a wisdom tooth taken out, and the professor who was doing it gave me a running commentary. I was absolutely fascinated. Well, you don't feel a thing, it's all right. But I didn't feel it afterwards.
When you came out of the sick bay,
yes,
you looked at the notice board.
Yes.
And were you amazed that your name was on the board, or did you...
No, I knew I was on the rota, but my name was there to take house prayers that night. And house prayers was a very simple thing. It was sort of story, hymn and a prayer, and senior boys did it.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, well, this is sort-out time. Because while I was in the sick bay, someone had brought me a book to read, The Challenge of Missions by Dr. Oswald J. Smith, pastor of the People's Church, Toronto, in the Glory now. And but
that was whilst you were in the sick bay.
I read this book, and I was thrilled with the story of his church.
Yeah.
Broke, empty, with unpaid bills. He put them on a missionary diet. Someone has said, if you've got a sick church, the best thing for it is to put it on a missionary diet.
And that's what he did.
That's what he did. He encouraged them to give to missions. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things will be added unto you. And he waived the unpaid bills before the congregation. They started to give to missions.
Yeah.
And that story started in 1930. I was reading the book in 1956. They could report at that stage that they were now, all seats were taken, 2,000 seats taken, morning and evening. In addition, they were supporting over 360 missionaries. And I was blessed. Yes. So all these thoughts were going around in my mind. I'd already had my name put forward to see a bishop with a view to the Anglican ministry. I knew I was a Christian now. I desperately needed to know, did God want me in the ministry?
Now, is that when you came to the place that you called it sort-out time?
It was sort-out time,
Sort-out time about what?
Well, I needed to know, did God want me in the ministry?
Yeah.
So I had to take house prayers, went into the chapel, it was all dark, didn't bother to put the lights on, got on my knees, and I said, Lord, this is it. This is sort-out time. I think you want me in the Church of England ministry. I think the answer is yes. When I get a church, I think you'll want me to make it missionary-minded. I think the answer is yes. And when I do get there, I believe you want me to be aggressively evangelistic. I believe the answer is yes. If it is yes, give me one soul tonight. So I went and took house prayers, and basically I just gave my testimony of what had happened the previous vacation. And I said, if anyone else wants to know the Lord like that, come and see me afterwards. And just one fellow did.
And
so God gave me the confirmation. I asked him for a sign. You're not allowed to do that, are you?
No, you're
but
not.
I did.
Not really.
But I did. And that's right. If you believe the Bible, you can. Yeah. It's not sort of every day. It's sort of, but once in a lifetime, possibly twice, it's allowable.
How many times has it happened to you?
Twice.
I won't ask you about the second one.
No, we haven't got time. I'd love to talk to you about it because you were involved in it.
What was I? Oh dear. The first church that you went to, in which you were involved, was actually Pippin J. But by the way, why on earth did they call the place Pippin J? That's not the official name.
No, it isn't. The official name is St. Philip and St. Jacob with Emmanuel or the Unity, which is a bit of a mouthful. So we call it Pippin J for short. Actually, it was a name given by the youth leader of another church where I was the curate. Because when I was first ordained, my vicar was priest in charge of Pippin J, so I was down there every other Sunday right from the word go. That's why I say I've always been there, all my ministry. But the youth leader saw me walking on my way to Pippin J. He said, where are you tonight? And I said, I'm going to St. Philip and St. Jacob. He said, oh, Pippin J then. And the name just grabbed it and started. I mean, it's a catchy name.
It is.
Please pray for Pip and Jay. You know, give away with Pip and Jay. Let's stay at Pip and Jay. All the way with Pip and Jay for Jesus, you know.
You've done your commercial,
Yes,
okay. Now, I want to move to some facts.
Yes.
When you started there were, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, there were 8 at the 8 o'clock service and there were 20 at the 11 o'clock. And if you had about 40...
Yep.
30 to 40 on a Sunday night,
Yep.
you thought it was revival time.
That's right.
So it's not surprising, really, looking at the facts, that they wanted to close it. And as far as I understand, they already had a prospective buyer. Was it something to do with the potato factory?
Well, they had an alternative use for the building. If you're going to make a church redundant, you've got to have an alternative use for it. Yeah. And they decided they were going to make it a potato warehouse, a sort of a visual aid the church had its chips, something like that.
Yeah. And how did you feel about that then? Did that give you an extra zip, extra zeal?
Not really. I mean, while I was there, I just sort of, I felt sorry for them. I mean, I was there literally to help my vicar run the services until the church would officially close at the end of 1964.
Yeah.
At the end of 1963, the first Sunday in December 1963, a bunch of young people who'd been virtually made to leave their youth club because they were too Christian, if you please, had made their home at our church. They were using our church premises for a club, and they suddenly decided, look, if this church is making us welcome, we ought to worship there. And so one Sunday night, about 20 of them trooped in.
Yeah.
And of course, new heart, new life, new vision, new everything. So when we got to the end of 1964 and the letter came from the bishop saying this church will now close, what arrangements are you making for a closing down service?
Yes.
The church wardens and the others wrote to the bishop and said, no, we see signs of new life.
Yeah.
We want to stay open. And he was very gracious, Bishop Oliver Tompkins. He was
he was helpful to you, wasn't he?
Very helpful.
Did he ordain you?
He did indeed. He did indeed. Yeah,
yes.
Good man. And his story is a marvellous story too, if you ever get hold of it. Yeah, he was actually converted, he would say, under the ministry of Gypsy Smith.
I see.
Yes, but he would say, I've come a long way since then, and he certainly has.
Now, in 1965, I think it was 1965, they gave you quite a terrific challenge about the possibility of keeping the church open.
What the bishop said was, we will give you a 3-year trial period, we will give you 2 targets to achieve. There is no way we can guarantee the church will stay open anyway, but at least it'll give you something to get on with. The first target was raise the average congregation, the average attendance at the evening congregation to 120. We were knocking round about the 60-70 mark at the time. Secondly, raise £500 over and above all running expenses to put aside for the fabric of the building, so we will know that should you stay open, you'll not be a drain on central resources.
Would you keep that big church going, the fabric, on 500 a year? No?
No, and you wouldn't have done it then. It needed much more than that. It was just a figure conjured up out of the air to give us something to aim at.
Yeah.
Well, 3 years to do that. We did both targets in only half the set time. We had 1,500 in the kitty, and we had an average congregation of 120.
Good.
So we wrote to the bishop and told him, and he said, well, yes, well done, keep up the good work, but I can't make a decision yet because I've just appointed a commission. Well, anyway, it's a long story.
We won't go into it.
No, at the end of 1969...
I hate commissions.
At the end of 1969, we were told that they'd appointed me priest in charge, which is a sort of a temporary vicar by this time. They said they would not review the situation again for 10 years, but they would if I wanted them to, and if I felt we weren't fulfilling things and wanted to close up anyway, all I had to do was lift the phone and call the bishop and they'd do it. But we said, well, 10 years, the Lord will be back by then, so that's all right. and we continued, and we continued increasing our missionary giveaway. When we got, in fact, to only 1967, my boss, who was then the vicar of St. Luke's Barton Hill, Roy Henderson, was moved to another parish in Bristol. And the bishop chose that opportunity to appoint me the priest in charge. Yeah. And so I was virtually a sort of a vicar, but you're not a permanent vicar. That's all it means. A bishop can move you overnight. And the years went by. We got to 1974. The year 1973, we gave something like 8,000 to missions.
Now, talking about this mission thing, I have in my hand a sort of press cutting, and it says Pip and Jay top the 1 million for missions.
That's right.
Am I right if I say that that book that you read
Yes.
in the sick bay
Yep.
by Oswald
Yes.
Smith, you carried the truth of that, or the
Yep.
inspiration
Yep.
of that,
Well,
into your ministry?
we called our magazine Seek First. And
that's this,
I mean,
is it?
I mean, it comes from the scriptures, Matthew
Yeah.
6:33, but it's not original. It came from Oswald Smith. He was the one who inspired us. He's inspired so many churches and ministers across the world. He inspired George Verwer, the head of Operation
Yes.
Mobilization. George will be the first to admit it. And that was where our inspiration came from. So, as I was saying, 74,
Yeah.
we said, it was also our 800th anniversary as a church. We said, we must try and give the Lord a special gift this year. Let's go for £10,000. In fact, God enabled us to give 13,000 away that year. Now, if we jump ahead, when we got to 1993,
Yeah.
I realized that on the first Sunday in December 93, we would have been in fellowship for 30 years. I did some sums,
Yeah.
and I saw that if we gave 90-odd grand away, then we were going to have given the first £1 million to missions.
That's
God
terrific.
enabled us to give much more than that. So when we did that, we then said, right, well, in spite of, when we take inflation into consideration, we ought to be able to give the second million in 10 years by 2003.
You haven't done it, have you?
We did it by last Easter. And
Two-
so we're having a double celebration.
Right.
On June 17th, we're going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of my ordination and the fact that God's enabled us to
Now,
give the second million to missions.
I want to stop you.
Right.
I want to get this absolutely straight so that nobody misunderstands what you're
Right.
telling me. You are telling me that your church, in the space of the last 38 years, something like that, that you have actually survived as a church, and at the same time you've given 2 million. Did you say 2 million or
I did.
2,000?
2 million.
How do you cope with it? How did you manage that then?
We would say it's simply a miracle. One of the Bible promises is, from Jesus, give and it shall be given unto
Right.
you. And we've encouraged people to do that on an individual basis and to do it on a corporate basis.
Yes,
And on the corporate basis, God has certainly piled the money back to us.
That's great.
And it's been really exciting and thrilling. We would simply say, in the words of Oswald Smith,
That's right.
to God be the glory, he has done it all.
And you've actually worked on that quote that you used earlier on, the best remedy for a sick church is to put it on a missionary diet.
Absolutely.
Now, the situation is you have this large missionary sum, okay. How do you direct it? Do you give it to societies, or do you have missionaries from your own church that you support?
When we started, Ron, we gave it to societies because we had no missionaries with whom we were personally in contact. But now we have something like, I added up today, 26 people on the mission field. Some of those are couples, but 14 missionary units of
Yes.
people.
You got a
And
photo
so-
of the
and so we
newest
give
ones.
we give to them.
Yes.
They're our prime
Yeah.
objects of support. But we also give to organisations as well. For example, we give to Tear Fund,
Yeah.
and we give to the Leprosy Mission because I think it's very important. We've got to minister to those in need,
Yes.
those in poverty and those who are sick.
If somebody said to you, all that's happened in the past, what's your vision for the future? I have a fair idea what your answer would be.
I was going to say the only reason I stay at Pip and J is because I wonder what the Lord's going to do next, and I don't want to miss out. And we shall. At the moment, God has not given us any specific
No.
mission. I mean, our bishop.
He gave you a vision, didn't he?
Yes,
That's
and I always feel with the Apostle Paul, he was very content with the vision he'd been given, and he could say at the end of his life, I've not been disobedient to the heavenly vision.
And do you feel like that?
I do. I think some people say, oh, we need a new vision. That's because they're bored and they failed the old vision.
I take that. Now, what form do your services take? Is it always morning
If you
prayers?
came, no.
And always evening
If you,
prayers?
supposing you came in off the streets to one of our services and
Yeah.
you met me up and you said, well, I quite like that. I'm not sure it's necessarily my cup of tea, but I'd like to try this church out. What do you suggest? And I would say, come morning and evening for 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and then you will see the whole variety of what we do at Pip and J. Because we do ring the changes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be communion and I'll be dressed like this. Other times it'll be communion and I'll be looking like a discontented penguin about to retake the Falklands with all my finery on. And other times it'll be a hymn sandwich rally type thing.
Yeah.
Another time it'll be sort of 3/4 of an hour of worship and then hit them with the gospel type thing. We ring the changes.
Right.
So come for 6 weeks.
Can I?
Yes, please.
It's an official invitation. Right.
You have to preach as well, mind.
All right. Do you think the church is making much impact on our society?
Not as much as it ought to be making, but I believe the real church of Jesus Christ, not
Is.
necessarily the institutional church, but the real church, where there are real committed Christians meeting together, I believe they are making an impact, a bigger impact than the press are telling us.
Great. Now, Malcolm, it's been absolutely inspiring to talk to you. I can understand why they say you're a bit of a loose cannon. I can see it at work. I can see it operating.
I like firing broadsides.
There's one more question I want to ask you. I ask everybody who ever comes on the program. Canon, all the rest of it, 2 million for missionaries. Tell me, Malcolm, what does Jesus mean to you, Malcolm Widdecombe, right now as you talk to me?
He means absolutely everything. Without Jesus, I would be facing a lost eternity. Without Jesus, I would be facing a meaningless life. Without Jesus, there'd be no sense or purpose.
So you would recommend him to all our viewers today?
Absolutely.
No,
Jesus is fantastic.
Good.
He is wonderful, as the Bible says.
Thanks ever so much, Malcolm. Appreciate you giving the time and making the journey to be with me today. And for my part, it's been great to talk to you.
Thank you, Ron, very much.
Thanks ever so much. God bless for the next 40 years. I'm sure you'll be grateful to Malcolm Widdecombe for giving the time to chat with me today. And I believe that what I said at the beginning, now that you've had a chance to judge his story, hear it for yourself, I'm sure you are as inspired by it as I am. And it's a wonderful thing what God is able to do when we are prepared to hold on to the vision that he gives us. And that applies to us as individuals, and it applies to us as churches as well. And so on behalf of Malcolm and the camera crew and all involved in making this program, this is Ron Jones saying goodbye for this time. Take good care of yourself, take good care of each other, and God bless you real good.